The day after the inauguration, President Trump, Vice President Vance, and their families attended a prayer service at Washington National Cathedral. During the service, a Catholic bishop gave a sermon about loving our neighbors and about showing mercy to those we may disagree with, which are two very foundational Christian values. Values that cut across all Christian denominations, or at least I thought it did. As we learn later in the video, those very basic values about showing grace to those we disagree with and simply caring for the needy are actually not values of whatever version of Christianity that our president and vice president ascribe to. Trump and Vance looked extremely uncomfortable during the sermon, and multiple times Vance scoffed and looked at his wife with looks of disapproval. So let's watch the video and then break it down.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and Independent.
Vance did not like that, did he? He's probably thinking, how dare this Catholic bishop acknowledge that trans people exist in Democratic families, Republican families, independent families.
Dependent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night.
Look at their smirks. They may not be saying words, but the message they're giving is very loud.
Night shifts in hospitals, they may.
All she's saying is that immigrants often work the jobs that most everyday Americans won't do. They pick our crops. They work overnight shifts to clean the buildings that you work in. She hasn't said anything controversial yet. These are just facts.
May not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
That's very true. There's a commonly held belief on the right that immigrants, and specifically undocumented immigrants, commit higher crimes than American citizens, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Many credible studies prove that immigrants commit less crimes, both as a raw number and as a percentage, than American-born citizens, and for undocumented immigrants, that number is even lower. I have several peer-reviewed studies that I'm pulling all of this information from. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read them word for word, but I will put the links of all of these articles in the description of this video so you can check it out for yourself. All of these studies concluded that undocumented immigrants actually commit less crime both as a raw number and as a percentage than native-born Americans. And again, the links to these sources are in the description of this video, so check it out for yourself. Even if you don't read the studies or check out the evidence for yourself, it's common sense why the studies conclude what they do. Think about it, guys. There is a massive incentive for undocumented people to not get caught breaking the law. Because if they get caught breaking the law, the consequences are much greater than a regular American citizen. They are likely to get deported. It's also a commonly held belief on the right that Joe Biden didn't do much about these immigrants. But that couldn't be further from the truth either. Biden actually deported more immigrants than Trump did in his first 4 years, both as a raw number and as a percentage. And the links to that evidence is also in the description of this video. Let's continue.
They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger. for we were all once strangers in this land.
I mean, again, all she's really saying here is to have compassion for the people who are scared. She's not telling him to not deport people. She's saying there are people who are trying to flee from war, from disaster, from devastation in their countries, and that we should have open arms in accepting good faith immigrants, to simply have passion for the children whose families are being taken away from them. ICE is raiding elementary schools, taking children and deporting them and their families. That's some scary shit. Have some mercy. Have compassion for many of those who you may not agree with. You say you're a president for all Americans. Show it.
May God grant us the strength and courage to honor the dignity of every human being, to speak the truth to one another in love, and walk humbly with each other and our God for the good of all people in this nation and the world. Amen.
Well, that was the sermon, and we got to saw the reactions during the sermon, but let's see what they had to say afterward. Our president, in true Trumpian form, took to Twitter to say these very kind words about the service. He said, "The so-called bishop who spoke at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday morning was a radical left hardline Trump hater. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone, not compelling or smart. She failed to mention the large number of illegal immigrants that came into our country and killed people. God, this impression sucks. Many were deposited from jails and mental institutions. It is a giant crime wave that is taking place in the USA. Apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was a very boring and uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. She and her church owe the public an apology." This was Trump immediately after the service, and let's see what he had to say.
Mr. President, what did you think of the sermon? What did you think of the sermon? What did you think of the
What did you think of the service?
What did you think? Did you like it? Did you find it exciting? Not too exciting, was it? I didn't think it was a good service, no. Thank you very much.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
They can do much better.
Thank you, press.
What a fucking clown.
Inside. Thank you.
There's not even much more that needs to be said. In Trump's tweet, he said that the bishop completely forgot about all of the undocumented immigrants that are coming over here and killing people. That it's a giant crime wave in the US. When I just proved, and again, check the studies below, that undocumented immigrants can commit crimes at a less rate and obviously less as a raw number than American-born citizens do. Because of that massive incentive to not want to get caught. They're laying low. They're trying not to get in the spotlight. They're more quiet. And like the bishop mentioned, they pay taxes. They work the dirty jobs that Americans don't want to work. They have strong family values. They keep to themselves. They're paying taxes even though they're not receiving the benefits that American citizens get. Not all of them anyway. Again, the bishop wasn't saying anything controversial. She was just stating facts that trans people exist in all types of families, Republican, Democrat, Independent, that not every, and in fact, most undocumented immigrants don't commit crimes. That's also a fact. She wasn't inserting her belief or any value judgment on those facts. She was just stating facts. And she was pleading for Donald Trump to just have compassion for some of those people who have been demonized by the far-right media, even if you don't agree with their lifestyle. Like, Republicans don't agree that trans people, well, they don't really agree that they exist, but they don't agree that trans people should have the same basic constitutional rights as non-trans people. Just have compassion for these people. They are hurting. Even if you don't agree with why they're hurting, they're scared. Trans people, immigrants, immigrant children who are having their elementary schools raided. She's asking him to acknowledge, to have basic human decency. And that would be the sign of a good leader. Someone who acknowledges and says to them, says to trans people, says to immigrants, I don't agree with what you're doing, but I acknowledge that you are scared and you are hurt. But it's a foundational Christian value, or at least I thought, to have compassion for those we disagree with, for those who may even have hurt us, to care for the needy, even when you don't agree with who they are or what they're doing or what they identify as. So obviously this sermon went viral. And afterward, a Republican congressman tweeted and called for this bishop to be deported. Can you guys believe that? Calling for an American citizen to be deported simply because she's asking for the president to have compassion for trans people and compassion for immigrants. That's pretty much all I have to say about this. I think the videos and the tweets, they speak for themselves.